Hello, Matey Thrive Nation. Well, it's going to be an absolute cracker of a show. Probably one of the most important conversations I've had in 25 years of practice and 4 years of doing the podcast. And it's all about cancer. And it's with Professor Thomas Seyfried, who's been studying cancer for many years, written an incredible book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, over 150 peer-reviewed publications. Really someone that we need to listen to in terms of changing this exponentially increasing disease called cancer. And we had Dr. Katie Deming on the show, the conscious oncologist. And so it's a real privilege that she referred me to Professor Thomas Seyfried. Well, welcome and really value your work and everything that you've been doing in this field.
No, thank you very much. It's nice to be here today. Thank you.
Really, I'll give you a little bit of a frame, Prof, with regards to where I want to go to. Just really looking at, number one, an introduction to the rates and the escalation of cancer, possibly going to be increasing as a disease more than cardiovascular disease. And looking at the rates, when I started medical school 30 years ago, it was 1 in 4 would get cancer in their lifetimes. I think the rates are now 1 in 2 will get cancer in their lifetimes. So that's pretty profound. And when I tell patients and clients over the many years, they don't seem to be changing anything about the traditional way of treating cancer or preventing cancer. So that's a bit shocking, but maybe you can just introduce us to the escalating rates of cancer, number one. 2, looking at prevention, just because of the general dogma out there in terms of treating cancer, it just seems so hard to break, even with you having written this incredible book in 2012. And then 3, looking at some case studies of this Press Pulse protocol, strategic therapeutic protocol that you've used, and just giving some people some examples of another way to treat cancer. So let's kick it off with what is happening with the rates of cancer worldwide.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're going up. The reason they're going up is, to me, very clear and explainable, and it has to do with the diet and lifestyle issue. Our technology has outpaced our biology, and what that essentially means is that we as a species, our existence on the planet can be estimated to be 1 million years or somewhere in that general vicinity. We were existing on the planet as hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. And our physiology and biology has been homed by those experiences where we needed to have a lot of activity in obtaining food and a lot of activity in the preparation of food and chasing food and just surviving, which required a tremendous amount of energy. And the energy that came from to allow us to do this, that is surviving ice ages and moving from one continent to another, the general day-to-day activities of survival was a very, very different experience for hundreds of thousands of years than what we're doing today. So you can clearly see by folks that live according to their ancestral ways, some of these Aboriginal tribes, where cancer, the late humanitarian physician Albert Schweitzer studied cancer in African tribes, and it was very, very rare. People who saw Inuits or Eskimos, they saw cancer being very rare. And then within a short period of time, a few generations, you have an explosion of all kinds of chronic diseases. So the bottom line is you can see in Wales, England, in fact, we have a book by Tim Noakes, infections and certain kinds of injuries and things like this were predominant for reducing lifespan. Cancer was very low. And then by 1996, cancer became a major form of lifespan interruption. And, you're saying to yourself, well, what the hell happened here? It can't be genetic because we can't change genes that fast. So it's clearly an environmental problem. And our ancestors did not have delicatessens and donut shops on every corner. Our highly processed foods, poorly nutritious foods that are in the food chain are everywhere. Our lifestyle today is far different. We sit in traffic, we sit in front of computers, we sit on cell phones. Our level of activity during the course of a day is far less than it was, say, 50,000 years ago. Even during the Neolithic period, when we started to cultivate grains, which began civilization around our ability to harness food in one location, whether it was corn, wheat, or rice, or whatever, still took a lot of energy to hoe the fields and reap the food from these grains, which were more natural kinds of things. They weren't highly processed carbohydrates as we have today. I mean, a tomato could last only a few days before it would go rotten. Today, we have tomatoes that can sit 6 months on a shelf. You know, when we put it all together, we have an introduction of food into our food chain that provides less nutrients, minerals, and health benefits than it did years ago. We don't have an activity. We're not as active as we used to be. You put all that together, and you get an explosion of chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, macular degeneration, dementia. You can put it all together. And what we have is a rapid advance in technology, but a much, much slower catch-up in our biology. And we're paying the price. So when you see this obesity epidemic, and you see all these fat people walking around, that is evolution in action. We existed on the planet to store energy for hundreds of thousands of years. And in a very short period of time, highly processed carbohydrate is everywhere. And our bodies are geared to store energy. And what that means is you get super fat very quickly because you're not exercising. People say, well, I don't understand evolution. Just look around. When you see the fat guys, that's evolution in action. Those are the survivors. Those folks, their ancestors were the ones that were surviving through the greatest restrictions of food. So we are descendants of people that lived on the planet for hundreds of thousands of years in a food-restricted environment. And all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, we have an abundance of highly processed carbohydrate foods with minimal nutritional value, and that explains what the problem is. And as long as we continue on that path, cancer will double, heart disease will double, diabetes. Now we have all this technology to replace hearts and we, keep people alive longer in a less healthy state. But we have a technology that's advancing faster than our biology. And that explains all of these things in a very clear concept of evolutionary biology. There it is, not that complicated.
Good. So you've looked at some of the causes or etiology with regards just to having way too much energy and calories that you're taking in and not expending enough. And are the rates correct? Because, I mean, people, I don't know if they're aware at the exponential rates. I mean, 1 in 2 getting cancer, or kids getting cancer a lot more than they used to. What has happened over the last 50 years since Nixon declared war on cancer, 1971? It doesn't seem like the traditional way of treating cancer has been really effective. Maybe you can speak to that, because I really want people to understand that we have a crisis. We have a significant cancer crisis. It seems like people are just totally unaware.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. They're unaware. But the strategy, the reason why we're not dropping the death rate, and the United States, according to the most recent data from the American Cancer Society, which publishes the death statistics every year in very extensive tables for each type of cancer and different racial and ethnic groups, you can see that every year we get more and more dead cancer patients. We're almost just about 1,700 people a day in the United States are dying from cancer, which comes out to about 70 people per hour, okay? Throughout our country, the United States, we're getting about 70 people dying every hour from cancer, and it goes up every year, right? So, we're not making any progress in reducing the death rate. And the reason for that is the treatments are all based on a flawed theory of what cancer actually is. And this is what I've spent a lot of my time doing, is showing that the underlying theory of what we think cancer is not correct. And according to the National Cancer Institute, and the National Cancer Institutes of all industrialized countries say that cancer is a genetic disease. So when you have cancer as a genetic disease, then the therapies that are going to be used to manage the disease are based on that underlying theory. So many of the new therapies that you hear about, mostly immunotherapies, CAR-T immunotherapy, Keytruda, Opdivo, PD-L1, PD-1 kinds, these are all immunotherapies called precision medicine. They're based on the multi-billion-dollar expenditure into finding gene mutations on cancer and then trying to target those things. And if the underlying theory is incorrect, then none of these therapies are going to be optimal for the majority of people suffering from the disorder. So what I have clearly shown is that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease. It's not a genetic disease. And the mutations that we are focusing on are downstream effects of the damage to the ability of that cell to produce energy through oxidative phosphorylation. So we're chasing downstream effects rather than the core of the problem, which is the cancer cell is restricted in its ability to get energy by a process of fermentation. These are ancient pathways of fermentation driven by two fuels only, glucose and glutamine. And none of the treatments that we're using today recognize that cancer is a metabolic disease and not a genetic disease. So the ship is going in the wrong direction, constantly looking at great technological advances that are focusing on downstream epiphenomena, which is not dealing with the problem of dropping the death rate. And this is clearly obvious. If people understand evolutionary biology and know how cells get energy, then they will know clearly we're not on the right track. We're not treating this as a metabolic disorder. And what a metabolic disorder means that you have to understand how cancer cells or any cell get energy, okay? And they get energy because we breathe oxygen. And every time we take a breath, we're bringing oxygen into our cells, allowing them to generate energy through the processes of oxidative phosphorylation, where the food that we eat is broken down, combusted in these little organelles called the mitochondria. And when those mitochondria become corrupted chronically, the cell must get energy from a different source, which is ancient pathways of fermentation. And all cancer cells are fermenters, regardless of what tissue or organ they come from. So they're driven by fermentation. They can't use oxygen. As a matter of fact, you can grow cancer cells in the presence of cyanide, and the absence of oxygen and in cyanide. Cyanide will kill you instantly because it shuts down your energy metabolism. You're dead. Nobody has to, right? But cancer cells, oh, no. We in fact, we grow cancer cells in cyanide. Why? Because they don't use oxygen. They don't use oxygen to generate ATP, energy. So how are they living? They're fermenting. How do you know that? They're crapping out lactic acid and succinic acid into the microenvironment. These are the waste products of fermentation metabolism. Yeah. How come nobody knows this? I have no clue. I mean, we've been writing it over and over again, but I'll tell you, there's a powerful force, and that force is called indoctrination, a dogma. And when the field and scientists and physicians are all thinking that something is other than what it is, and you've been drilled into your brain that this is a genetic disease. Every textbook, every book in biology, biochemistry says cancer is a genetic. How can they all be wrong? And they're all wrong because we got 1,700 people a day dying from cancer. That's what happens when the dogma is wrong. And this is the same thing that happened during the heliocentric, geocentric knowledge of the universe. The Catholic Church said the Earth was the center of the solar system, and if you challenge them, they'll burn you to death or the house arrest you. And today we're seeing they don't want to shift. Once Copernicus and Galileo and Kepler put the sun in the center of the solar, everything made sense. Everything makes sense, right? You take the mitochondria and put it in the center of the cancer problem, everything will make sense. And you'll be able to treat the disease in a logical way, and you'll be able to drop the death rate significantly by educating that you got to know you need exercise and good food, and you got to realize that this is a metabolic disease, and you can avoid it in many, many different ways. So what I just said to you encapsulates 30 years of research, but basically it's just giving you the overview, but we're doing the deep dive into the mechanisms to support what I just said.
Oh, there's a lot there, Prof, and I just want to try and distill it and deconstruct it. If you're listening, cancer is not a genetic disease. And we'll talk about secondary risk factors if you got the BRCA1 gene or the BRCA2 gene, talk about P53. I think some of these genes that are out there, they're risk factors, secondary risk factors, but this is a metabolic disease. And we'll talk about mitochondria, which are the energy factory parts of our cells, being very important. But I do want to ask you, do you think the current traditional dogma is only going to pass once this generation no longer practices and the new generation of doctors come through? You've been talking about it since 2012. I first heard about your work from Dr. Jack Kruse, who spoke about light and the electron transport chain and how important the inner mitochondrial membrane is, and the 5 complexes that you've been speaking about being photoreceptors. Him saying illumination's a big problem, as well as malnutrition, with too many calories and too much energy and not expending them enough. I then listened to your podcast with Peter Attia, I think that was in 2018. So it seems like things are not changing. And I don't know what book I read, I can't remember, but it almost seems to change the dogma is going to be next to impossible. I've had Tim Noakes on the podcast twice. It almost needs a new generation of thinkers and doctors to come through.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, Max Planck pointed that out, the German scientist. He said you can't change the paradigm until the guys who pass on that held the view of the wrong view. And that's the way paradigms change. You have to wait for the old guard to die off and the new people come in with a fresh view and they realize that. And I've said that before. So I said, okay, so we have to sacrifice needlessly all of these poor folks that are dying today because we have to wait for the people who have a misunderstanding of the nature of the problem die off. So if the world populations think that's an adequate explanation, then then it becomes an impossibility to make the change. So if that's okay with everybody else in the world, I mean, then that has to be that way. So we have to sit there and watch our loved ones be brutalized by a system that has no clue or a misunderstanding of what the nature of the problem is. And if that's what has to happen, then that's what has to happen. Okay. And if the world population thinks, okay, let's wait for another 30 to 40 years while these guys that think cancer is a genetic disease pass on, then we can then start to do the things the right way and keep the death rate under control. And then that's the way it is. Then it becomes an impossibility. But that I'll leave that up to you, and leave that you do. Leave it up to the people. What do the people want? What do the people really want? Do they want to wait, or do they want something that can actually happen soon? That's their choice. I already know what we need to do, and we know how to do it. Now, if nobody else cares about it, then what are you going to do? I can't do anything.
Brilliant. I do want to talk about like your top 10 prevention, because I mean, many of these people are going to try and prevent diseases, like cancer. So I know in order of priority, you've mentioned sort of the diet and exercise, but maybe just give us your top 10 areas in terms of how to prevent this disease the best way. Obviously, it's to make sure that you've got the best mitochondrial efficiency and these mitochondria working and the electron transport chain working exceptionally well. But if you had to put it in order of priority, what would be the most important things that people can do right now that are listening to say, I want to prevent this disease? Because once they've got it, there's so much fear in the system, Prof, that they've got a fear, they get this amygdala hijack. There's no prefrontal cortex even thinking, logical thinking. I've sat with loved ones, I've sat with patients, I've got compassion fatigue after 25 years of practice, because I look at people that I've spoken to and now they've got stage 4 cancer. They didn't listen to me 10 years ago. So they're just not listening from this amygdala hijack. So tell us, prevention-wise, what you think the most important strategies are.
Well, let's break it down into two major categories first. What a lot of folks do is they overlap prevention with treatment. And like you just said, you should have listened to me before and you didn't. Now you got this problem. Okay, well, prevention now is out of the discussion. We have to now try to manage what you have. Okay, but if you knew how to prevent cancer, then you wouldn't be talking to me about how to manage it. So what we did in 1990, just to give you an idea of how powerful prevention is, we stopped the smoking. Anti-smoking campaigns were initiated in the early 1990s, and it became powerful because you were infringing upon the health of others by your smoking. So the restaurants used to have smoking and non-smoking, and then no smoking, and then if you get caught smoking, you had to go outside. And according to the American Cancer Society, we've reduced cancer by about 30% as the result of the anti-smoking campaigns. So they have a nice, if you look at their latest publication from the American Cancer Society, they have a trajectory that if we didn't stop smoking, how many dead people would we have from cancer today? And they estimate that we would have 30% more dead cancer patients today if we didn't stop smoking, right? So so we have all these fictitious cancer patients that would have been dead if we didn't stop smoking. So they come out and say we're making major advances in cancer because we have 33% lower deaths today than we would have had if we continued to smoke. Okay, so that tells you the power of prevention. Okay, so today obesity is replacing smoking as a #1 risk factor. And obesity is often linked to type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, all these other things, and all of which damage oxidative phosphorylation chronically in the body. So if we were really, really interested in prevention, we would see very, very few obese people. The fact that we have a worldwide obesity epidemic tells us that we're really not that interested in preventing cancer. Otherwise, people would say, oh my God, I put on 5 pounds. I got to reduce these 5 pounds. Otherwise, I'm going to get colon cancer or something like this. So prevention is education. And don't forget, the anti-smoking campaign would have never been possible had your behavior not impacted on someone else's health. So it was a societal peer pressure. There's no society peer pressure to say that fat guy over there is impacting on my health, and that's not happening. And we can't blame. It's a blame game. So we're going to have this problem, and you have to know that it's extremely difficult to get cancer if you maintain your mitochondria health. How do you maintain mitochondria health? Well, diet and exercise for sure, but we developed a quantitative biomarker to let people know what they do to remain healthy. And it was the glucose ketone index calculator. And I published that for brain cancer patients to allow them to know when they're in a zone where other therapies will now be very impactful in reducing their cancer. But I'm now realizing that a lot of these health gurus and all these exercise guys and health food guys, they're all using the GKI to know whether or not they're in a very healthy state in their own physiology. And the late George Cahill, who wrote many books on human starvation, said that our ancestors were always in a state of nutritional ketosis, where you had anywhere from 2 to 4 millimolar ketone bodies in your circulation. This is very much lower than ketoacidosis, which is about 18 to 20 millimolar, which is a type 1 diet. It's very critically, it's a critical thing. So to get 2 to 4 millimolar blood ketones, you have to have low glucose. You can't be eating many highly processed carbohydrate foods. You have to be doing considerable exercise and eating low amounts of highly processed carbohydrate foods, and you get into this state of nutritional ketosis, which then brings the bioenergetic capacity of your mitochondria to a new super energy state. Because my late great colleague, Richard Veach from the NIH, showed how ketone bodies enhance the delta G prime of ATP hydrolysis in mitochondria, producing fewer oxygen-free radicals. It is, and he called it a super fuel. All of our ancestors in the past were in this nutritional ketotic state. Cancer did not exist in any great number. Animals in the wild, like wolves and chimpanzees and these guys, they don't get cancer, very, very rare, because they're in their natural diet and lifestyle. The #1 killer of wolves seems to be injury. All domestic dogs are derived from wolves. The #1 killer of domestic dogs is cancer. I mean,
you telling me that most of us have to be in nutritional ketosis to get that glucose ketone index? And I've done a lot of fasting, a lot of work getting ketones up. It's not an easy process, but for someone like myself, 25 years, never taken a sick day off in practice, over 140,000 treatments. Okay. I think my immune system is pretty robust. I have done stages, where I've done a lot of ketosis and fasting and that work. But are you saying that ketones are protective? Are you saying it's the ratio? Are you saying that it's hyperinsulinemia? Because many people have a normal HbA1c, 3-month glucose level, but their insulin level, and they've had insulin resistance maybe for 5 years, and they get cancer. So is it the index? Is it a combination of those? And should we then be in nutritional ketosis more often?
Yes, but the problem is our diet and lifestyle in our society, everything prevents that from happening. #1, people don't know what I just said. #2, you walk out on the street corner anywhere in any city, and you have all of the kinds of consumption of foods that keep you away from a GKI of below 5 or something like this. And it's tempting because let's be honest, these foods that we have today are delicious. I mean, they have been designed and made to make us want that because our whole existence on the planet was in a carbohydrate restricted environment. But our physiology is geared to want the carbohydrates because that means you could store energy and leave more offspring for the next generation, which is evolution. So the desire for now, our technology has produced a massive amounts of readily available carbohydrates. So our physiology is in conflict with our daily lives. And this makes it a very tempting problem for people. Now, we had no choice when we were living in the Paleolithic period to be in ketosis because we didn't have foods that gave us very high circulating glucose. So it wasn't something we hadn't, it was something we just existed in that environment. Can you imagine if we could go back in time in the Paleolithic period when some poor guys are slaughtering some deer or elk that they killed and bring in a big box of jelly-filled donuts to these guys? I mean, they'd be killing each other to get these donuts. I mean, it would be, right? Think about it.
That's true.
I mean, you think they'd be saying, "Oh no, let's go eat this tuber that we just dug out of the ground, or let's have this glazed donut." I mean, the idea is that we're so geared for wanting sugar, and our brains are addicted to glucose. If anybody doesn't believe me, try do a water-only fast for a few days after eating a normal Western diet.
But Prof, now, so what are you doing and what are you saying to your family? Because, I mean, this is crucially important. And cancer is pretty clever. It's not only the glucose ketone index, because the ketones might be protected, but now you've got glutamine. And glutamine is just so abundant. So now you get the GKI index really good, and the clever cancer starts using glutamine. And now you get another cancer that might be glutamine-based. And maybe you can just give us an indication of how many cancers are really glucose maybe orientated and how many are glutamine based, and if we know the answers to those two questions.
Yes. Well, again, you're overlapping prevention with treatment. Okay, so our ancestors were in a state of nutritional ketosis. Glutamine has always been the most abundant circulating amino acid in our body. Glutamine is an essential metabolite for the function of our gut and our immune system. So glutamine, even though they consider it a non-essential amino acid, is essential for gut health and for immune system, the urea cycle. So when we're in a state of nutritional ketosis, the glutamine is there. So if we get infections or whatever, we're resistant. Don't forget, we are an extremely resistant machine, if you want to call it that. We are all machines driven by an energy efficiency that's unbelievably sophisticated. Okay, now when you get cancer, yes, because the cell needs energy, and if you can't get energy through oxidative phosphorylation, you have to open the floodgates to get energy from fermentation, and all of a sudden now glucose and glutamine now becomes fermentable fuels. So glutamine can be respired for sure in normal cells by some normal cells, but in cancer cells ferment. They can get energy from glutamine without oxygen. So this is the whole thing about a cancer cell. It can get energy without oxygen. And our main discovery here, what we did here at Boston College, also in collaboration with Dr. Christos Xenopoulos from Semmelweis University in Budapest, world expert on mitochondrial fermentation, substrate level phosphorylation. We have made the discovery that Otto Warburg and most people in the field are not aware of, that the amino acid glutamine gets energy through a fermentation process, not an oxidative phosphorylation process. So it's a fermentable fuel like glucose is now fermented to lactic acid. Glutamine is now fermented to succinic acid. And, it was very interesting. When people get a heart attack, the two fuels that come up into the bloodstream almost immediately are lactic acid and succinic acid, clearly telling us that our body is using a fermentation metabolism to stay alive. And that can happen for a short period of time. And if it happens for too long, your brain dies and you're dead. But those cells in our body are using fermentation to stay alive in the absence of oxygen. Okay. So when you massage the heart, you get oxygen back into your body. Lactic acid and succinic acid immediately fall because we restored back to oxidative phosphorylation. The difference between that system, which is a transient reliance on fermentation, versus cancer is locked in to fermentation. Even in the presence of oxygen, the cells are still fermenting glucose and glutamine, producing lactic acid and succinic acid through the two high throughput pathways that are allowing this cell to grow in a dysregulated state. So again, everything makes complete sense when you understand the biology and biochemistry of cancer versus normal cells. So I focused all my attention on energy metabolism, only because without energy, nothing can grow. Doesn't make any difference what kind of gene mutations you have, what other signaling pathways, all that's downstream to energy. Energy is central. So you have to say, what are these cancer cells using to get energy? They're fermenting in the presence of oxygen? Yeah, Warburg said that. They threw him under the bus because everybody thought cancer was genetic, and they left him behind, and they ran out chasing genes, and we're still paying the price today with this cancer epidemic because we all think it was a genetic disease. And the real guy who figured it out, most of it, not all of it, we figured the other half out, he figured the first part out, is that the damn cells are fermenting glucose and glutamine simultaneously. So this explains it. So therapeutic modality of cancer should be to restrict glucose and glutamine simultaneously while transitioning the body to nutritional ketosis. And then what happens is you put tremendous pressure on the inflammation, the angiogenesis, all of the different signaling pathways that are supposed to be so important. The damn cells die. And when the cells die, you don't have to worry about the mTOR signaling, PI3 AKT signaling, insulin-like growth factor. All that stuff goes away with the cancer cells dying. So most of our investment in cancer today is studying all these signaling pathways, look at all these gene mutations. Why don't you try to kill the tumor cell? What's wrong with that? If you get rid of the tumor cell, make the rest of the body healthy, should we wait for decades and decades before we realize what I just said? Let's study mTOR pathways. Why don't we kill the damn tumor cell and don't worry about the mTOR pathway or the insulin pathway and all these pathways? Yes, insulin sensitivity. Why are you doing insulin sensitivity? Because the cells can't respire effectively. So, I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know how long it's going to take the field to come to realize this. Like you said, we have to wait 35 years before people say, oh yeah, no, how come it was so simple? How come nobody saw this before?
So the summary is this, Prof. People need to be mainly in nutritional ketosis, is what telling yourself and your family and stuff.
I think our ancestors had no choice. They had no clue about this. Today, I think once the education comes, I don't think people have to be in nutritional ketosis 24/7 and live like you were during the Paleolithic period. Now, of course, we always have those extreme nuts that are out there wanting to live like some caveman. I mean, we have to, some guy, I can't eat a piece of meat, I can't eat a vegetable. Or, it's like, give me a break. I mean, we evolved to eat anything that walked, crawled, or flew on this planet. Right? We even ate each other, for Christ's sake. I mean, the thing of it is we evolved as omnivores. That's our history. And our digestive system and our evolution is all based into that. And so I would say, I don't care if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, a pescatarian, a Mediterranean, if you can get your GKI down occasionally to a lower level, the mitochondria get super healthy, and you can purge your body of any incipient tumor cell that might be there because it's going to struggle to stay alive. So we don't forget, our ancestors had no choice. We have choices. We can eat the fine foods and enjoy the hamburger and the jelly-filled donut, but we have to know that we only can do that periodically. Otherwise, we put ourselves at risk for chronic diseases and damage to the mitochondria and the consequences that happen as the result of that. So I don't say we should take away all the pleasures that our technology has provided us. I just think we need the education to know when and when not to do that, and the repercussions that can happen if you don't understand what I have just said.
So you're saying maybe get into this glucose ketone index once a week where it's like 2 or 3 under 5. Are you saying doing a water fast every quarter, 3 days water fast, possibly to like purge and, just starve these, cancers? What is sort of your frame? Because I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about.
Yeah, I can't, I'm not here to proselytize on any of this stuff. If I want to have a glass of whiskey, I'm going to have a glass of whiskey. or pound a few beers. The issue is you've got to know that you can readjust your body. We are so flexible. And I'm not saying, oh, once a week now, you got to get your GKI into 2.0. But I'm not saying that crap. I mean, if you think that you want to do it, good, you do it. So I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm here to tell them what they might want to think about doing stuff. At least there's knowledge and education. They can read the articles. There's competition out there now to see, could you get your GKI this, I got my GKI down to 0.8. Wow, what did you do? It's like, well, I don't know. Yeah, if you want to be that kind of a nut. The issue here is that you have a strategy. Exercise is absolutely crucial. And as Cahill said, exercise will lower glutamine levels, and it lowers glucose levels, and it makes increases the functionality of your mitochondria. So there's a lot of things that we can incorporate into our daily lives that don't have to make us live like we were in the Paleolithic period. So, but that requires, and then of course you have all the crazies that are going to be out there. Eat this, do that, and you're going to get healthy. And all these guys, I find out there's very few thinkers on the planet. Most people do what everybody else does for some reason. Did he do that? Did he say that? Let's go and do that. What did you think? No, I never thought about it. It's like.
But let's talk about that mitochondrial, I mean, it's so important, the efficiency of that mitochondria, like toxins. I had Stephanie Seneff on, and glyphosate affecting this electron transport chain, then using things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Tell us your view on using some of these. Obviously, exercise, you're talking anaerobic exercise, aerobic, or you're talking 5 days a week, just some type of guideline, dealing with things like glyphosate that were never around for such a long time. What are your views in terms of helping people prevent this disease using those sort of frames?
Well, again, everything comes back to mitochondrial biology. How do you enhance the vitality of your mitochondria, which means oxidative phosphorylation, and the efficiency of ketones? That's why Veach called it a superfuel, and the bioenergetics of that is really fascinating. And I can go into it, but I don't think it would be understood. Not to say that I'm not appreciating people's ability to know things. It's just that it deals with a lot of bioenergetics and the electron transport chain and the proton motive gradient and a lot of these kinds of things. But Veach has written some papers. And I always told Veach, because he knew what was going on, and he wrote these incredibly important papers. But you had to think deeply, and you had to understand bioenergetics. And I used to tell Veach when he was alive, I said, Bud, I said, you're right. This is the clue to staying healthy and avoiding disease. But you write it in such a way that almost nobody but the deepest thinkers can understand it. And he used to say to me, that's their goddamn problem, but they're too stupid. I said, well, that's not going to help anybody, Bud. You got to be able to translate this knowledge that you have to the general population. And I spent so much time talking with him, trying to figure out how to explain his knowledge to a broader range of people that may not have the time or capability of understanding bioenergetic rules. And we just have to know that ketone bodies, elevation of ketone bodies into normal physiological levels, allow your mitochondria to become super healthy in combination with lower glucose. That means you're mobilizing fat out of your fat adipocytes. These fats are going into the bloodstream, into your liver, and your liver is chopping down the fatty acids into small water-soluble ketone bodies that will now allow your brain to transition away from glucose to ketones. And this is the way we were. And our muscles get healthier, our heart gets healthier, our brain gets... So when you are in nutritional ketosis, think about our ancestors. When they had to kill an animal at a distance, they would have to smell things, look at the environment. All of these things were our physiology peaked to its highest level of potential. And they're all in nutritional ketosis. When you let your blood sugar get really high, insulin insensitivity, our senses, sight, smell, taste, they all become diminished compared to what they could be. So again, it's knowing our physiology, how we evolved as a species and how other animals evolved as species to understand maximal energetic efficiency. And this is what that people, now once they hear about this, they might want to look into it. The GKI is simply a quantitative measure to let you know, how far off am I from this idyllic Paleolithic state? And then people say, oh my God. So how hard is it to get into it? Well, our ancestors were in that state all the time, pal.
That's true.
They had no choice. They had no choice. We have a choice. And that's the thing. And this choice, you got to know. And then people say, oh, I try to do this, especially the cancer patient. I feel so bad because number one, they have anxiety. And like you said, the amygdala thing, that creates elevated glucocorticoids, which elevates blood sugar, makes the tumors grow faster. So the very anxiety of someone telling you have a terminal disease makes your body accelerate the disease because you don't understand the biology. So stress management is very important for the cancer patient to lower the glucocorticoids, the insulin, get yourself back. Realize that you can manage this disease if you know what to do and how to do it. Gotcha. And you know that this is the key. So you now become a master of your destiny because you're working with a knowledgeable oncologist or physician that you work together as a team. What we do is we get the glucose index down, and then we deliver drugs, very powerful drugs in small amounts that target the glucose and glutamine simultaneously while the body is in nutritional ketosis. And the body then turns on these damn tumor cells and uses them as fuel. And this is the autolytic cannibalism. I wrote that in the chapter in my book, and I also did it in the dog can. Go look at the paper I published on the dog. He had a big ass tumor on his face, one of these mast cell tumors, and they said, "Oh, this dog is going to be dead." And the dog went on a metabolic therapy, and then the tumor just kind of like got assimilated off the dog's face using a metabolic approach. And that's an example of autolytic cannibalism. When you lower the threshold of energy in your body, all of the cells in your body start looking around where they're going to get energy from. And they see a bunch of tumor cells not contributing to the society as a whole. They're sucking energy out of the society and contributing nothing. The body goes after that and consumes the tumor and uses it for fuel for the cells that are actually functioning the way they should have functioned. It's unbelievable. When you think about it, it's just absolutely astonishing.
Now, are there a lot of studies on patient populations with regard to sample groups? I know that Dr. Greg Howard and is it Michelle Howard from, is it the Hippocrates Research Foundation are doing work using your Press Pulse therapeutic program. If people want to use this Press Pulse system, where can they look at it in terms of track records of patients or
yeah, well, see, this is the problem. The concepts, the framework of what we're speaking about is there based on hard understanding of biochemistry and biology. The actual implementation of Press Pulse therapeutic strategy is yet to be used effectively the way we would like and think it should be used. Mainly because the folks that are trying to understand this have not yet been fully educated and knowing the concepts. And so there's a need for an educational mission to understand how different physiological systems work together and how we exploit the vulnerabilities of the tumor cells in light of the health of transitioning the body off to a healthier state. So the Press Pulse concept I derived from the world of paleobiology, where guys study massive extinctions that have happened over the past history on our planet. There have been times in our planet where we had these incredible amounts of living organisms in all levels, and then everything went extinct in a very short period of time, and then there was a resurgence of life on planet again. And they figured it out that it was a combination of two things that happened together. One was a chronic stress that eliminated many of the weak, but the strong remained. And then there was an incredible pulse, like a meteor strike or something like this, that killed the rest of them off. So, and that was considered Press Pulse. Two unlikely events happening together to cause mass extermination. And I just adapted that concept to targeting glucose and glutamine simultaneously while we transition the body off the nutritional ketosis. So you can't hit the cancer by targeting glucose alone, and you can't do it by hitting glutamine alone. you have to take the two together simultaneously while the body is in nutritional ketosis, because now the attack becomes so much less a problem. So it's we can press down glucose because glucose is a non-essential fuel, but we have to be strategic with glutamine because of its essential need on the part of our normal cells. So you have to pulse that, killing the tumor cell without harming the rest of the body. So again, we have to use these concepts together to design a strategy for the gradual elimination of the tumor while not harming any cells of the body. This is very, very different than the strategy we're using today in clinics. And the reason for that is because people think cancer is a genetic disease. Now, nobody wants to be irradiated and poisoned to try to get rid of their tumor, surgically mutilated, radiated, poisoned, and nuked. I mean, this is there because the promise of the genetic theory has not come to fruition and will never come to fruition because it's not the way cancer is designed. It's not a genetic disease. So they were hoping, the field was hoping that the knowledge from our genome, multi-billion-dollar genome projects and all this stuff would allow us to develop precision medicines that could go into a patient and strategically kill tumor cells. Well, that ain't happening because every cell in the damn tumor has different epitopes, and therefore you're only killing a few cells. So our procedure shrinks down the majority of the cells, kills most of them. Now, if you have a few residual cells, now you might want to bring in one of those other kinds of tools that can kill off the survivors. But we have all of the necessary tools and procedures to manage cancer effectively in the majority of people on the planet. We just fail to know how to use the tools in the correct way. So I'm not looking to say, oh, we have to develop new stuff. We got everything. The problem is people just don't know how to use the tools our rapid technology has developed in light of our revolutionary biology. So we can put it all together and come up with a very clear strategy of how to manage cancer without toxicity once people learn the concepts and knowing how to use the tools appropriately.
Let me ask you, I mean, I've got a big network in the US. My medical mentor, one of his family members got stage 4 cancer. I've had Katie Deming on the conscious oncologist. Is this a standard of care that, those that got board certified in the US can use this protocol? If someone, sends me a message and says, listen, I want to do this breast pulse therapeutic program, where do I go in the US? What do you say?
Okay, well, right now this is one of my biggest levels of frustration, not having anybody that will be able to use this. Because when we tried to do it in the hospitals, the IRB, institutional review boards, won't allow it. So they'll allow parts of it, but they won't allow the full use of metabolic therapy. For example, they will take, and don't forget clinical trials. Oh, they have to be, no. We have to abandon the craziness of the clinical trial, the way it's currently structured. Because when you do metabolic therapy, each person is their own control. You're looking at that person as a state. You're moving from a state of unhealth to a state of health in that person. And the strategy for that person may differ from the strategy used for another person at a different age, different gender, different stage of their life. So we have to adjust the therapy individually. And this is what makes it very interesting. We will use similar kinds of things for sure, but that's not part of the standard of care in any cancer program in the country. Right now, it's chemo, surgical mutilation, chemo and radiation, and maybe throw in some other stuff. But metabolic therapy, now we have to do a full blood work on each individual to know how far out of health they are. We have to bring them back into a new state of health, and then we come at the tumor with different drugs that will target simultaneously glucose and glutamine. So when we do trials, I've seen them all done. First of all, none of them are doing it the way I should say. We have a big paper with over 40 authors, biologists and MDs and physicians and all this under review, which clearly spells out a comprehensive treatment protocol on how to do. So how are you going to do a therapy when nobody knows what the hell to do? What do I do? What's my first thing to do? Well, we have it all written out and spelled out very clearly. Now, once you have that, who's willing to do it? So once you have the tool, once you have the complete program, how to do this, who's going to do it? And what happens then is that you say, okay, let's try it. We're gonna take this brain cancer patient and we're gonna treat him with standard of care, and then we're gonna try to put a metabolic therapy on top of the standard of care, And we see, oh yeah, when you do metabolic therapy, you get your overall survival goes from about 15 months, maybe to 20 months, and maybe a little bit longer. Wow, that's great. And I said, you're holding back metabolic therapy by irradiating the person's brain. As soon as you irradiate that guy's brain, you free up massive amounts of glucose and glutamine. So you're stacking the deck against your variability. So I said, so we have three groups. We have standard of care with metabolic therapy. That's what's going on in many clinics. Where's metabolic therapy by itself without the radiation and the poisoning? Oh, can't do that. Aha. Why can't you do that? Oh, no, can't do that. They never say why. And then you find out it's all revenue generation. So it comes to another problem that, whoa, my God, if this metabolic therapy is effective, why the hell are we doing all this other stuff? And the outcome of the patient is ultimately what should be driving the procedures. If people can live longer in a healthier state, then maybe we want to go in that direction, or should we not? Okay. And I know we're touching very third rails here on a lot of things, because you're really dealing with completely different way of treating a disease in a very different way than what's currently being done. And it's based on the hard science. What we're doing today it's based on flawed understanding of what the nature of cancer is. And that's why we have this, and it's not getting any better. It's only getting worse. So there's a lot of issues here. You understand what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right?
So like, I mean, having done regenerative medicine techniques and a lot of the laws in the US preventing people from using stem cells, and people have gone to, Mexico, and they've gone to Honduras, and they've gone to these other places. Is there nowhere in the world that someone could take your protocol exactly? I'm just being practical. You get one of your family members that gets diagnosed. What do they practically do? Because no one's doing it the way that needs to be done. And I mean, we're talking about something that's going to be part of the disease.
Like one of the most powerful drugs that we've worked with is 6-oxynoreleucine, DON. It was an antibiotic that was identified many years ago, and it's a glutamine targeting drug. And it's a dirty drug. It targets multiple enzyme systems at the same time. I mean, we find this drug to be extremely powerful. But here's the situation. It was used on cancer patients for many years, little children with leukemias and things like this, but they said it was a little too toxic and it wasn't effective for the majority of cancer patients. And then I went back and looked at the toxicity. I said, relative to what? Red Devil, doxorubicin? There's nothing compared to those toxic things we're doing today. It didn't kill anybody. When you see the advertisements on television for CAR-T and PD-L1 and these they'll kill people. It says right there, this could kill you. Well, Don never killed anybody. Now, the thing of it is we found out how to make it non-toxic and keep its therapeutic efficacy, but the drug is not available. Okay, why is the most powerful drug for cancer? And they said, oh, because it didn't work. Because you didn't do it the right way. You got to know how to do it, man. You got the tools. You just didn't know how to use it. And we only have to test one drug at a time, get double blind cross. No, throw that out, man. That's not the way you test metabolic therapy. You got to target the two fuels together while the patient is in nutritional ketosis. So you're measuring a lot of parameters all at the same time. And then this drug can be used in lower doses in strategic times that we're working on. And then you start to shut down the cancer cells up and die. So without harm to the rest of the body. So again, the drug is not available. Why is that? The most powerful drug that should be used as part of the normal routine for managing cancer is not available anywhere. A cheap-ass drug that could be doing a lot of good for people. And there's a lot of other drugs out there, and parasite medications targeting glucose and glutamine in low doses. I mean, we have so many ways to manage cancer without toxicity. It's just astonishing, and we're not doing any of it. Can you believe it? I mean, this is the tragedy. We're not using the tools that we have in the toolbox in the right way, knowing now that this is a metabolic disorder that we can manage. We can not only prevent it, but we can easily manage it without the toxicity that we're associated with. Now, what I said to you just now, I have the evidence to support it. I'm doing the work next door with the preclinical systems, and I've seen it in clinical case reports. Look at our case reports. Pablo Kelly's still alive with a brain tumor, 10 years out, glioblastoma, never radiation, no chemo. Is he cured? No, he's not cured. But he gets the bulk every 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, the issue is, what is the value? Quality of life and overall survival. Those are what we're shooting for. Okay, so, oh, did you cure my cancer? No. How do we know you're cured, man? You die at 98 years old, obviously from a heart attack, you're cured. The hell, I don't want to be cured. Don't ever say I have a cure for cancer. I have a strategy to manage cancer. That's what we have, a management strategy. Whether you're cured or not, who knows? But the bottom line is that a lot of these stage 4 cancer, terminal cancer patients are living a hell of a lot longer than their prognosis. What does that mean? That means you might know what the hell's going on.
So where did Pablo Kelly get the drug from, and where is the drug available then? I mean,
he never took any drug. He didn't take anything.
He didn't take the glutamine, the Don.
No, he didn't even take that. And as a matter of fact, we're astonished. Now, we think we can nip this whole thing in the bud a lot faster if we would use these drugs, because I'm astonished how long people can survive with these so-called stage 4 cancers. Like Guy Tannenbaum, he didn't take any Don either. He just did metabolic therapy, and he's on the YouTube videos. He had terminal prostate cancer, and he's out 6 years. Maggie Jones, who's making the movie The Cancer Revolution with her husband Bradley, they're collecting a registry of all these so-called walking dead stage 4 cancer patients. All have done various forms of metabolic therapy on their own and living a hell of a lot longer than their prognosis.
Never used Don. Never used the glutamine.
None of them never used Don. So we're saying, God damn, if you use Don, you could make the management much better, quicker. So
Don, you've got to have like a compounding pharmacist, and you've got to develop a business to actually make the thing so that you can use it.
Yeah, but why don't you go to the hospital and say, why are you not using that? And say, oh, because it worked. It's too toxic. And you say, relative to what? Relative to Red Devil? Well, I didn't know. I didn't look into that. Well, why don't you look into it, for crying out loud? I'm sitting here talking to so many people who have no clue what the hell they're doing. But they would be very valuable to participate in this if they could just open their minds and look at this as a metabolic problem. And then everything I'm saying makes perfect sense. And how do I know it? Because I'm doing the research. And others have. Otto Warburg did this research a long time ago. It's just they didn't have all the parts to the puzzle. We have the parts to the puzzle. We can drop this cancer death rate by a significant amount in a relatively short period of time. Are we going to cure everybody? No, you're not going to cure everybody with cancer. But are we going to allow people to live longer at a higher quality of life? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, what the hell's wrong with that? It's better than the status quo we have now. Yeah. And then we'll develop that. And companies and procedures and hospitals and clinics will all revolve around that. And there'll be a new way to treat people and educate the prevention. And then we have ways to treat the cancer that are going to be far more effective and less toxic than what we have currently today. How long is it going to take? I don't know. I have no clue. You're young. You should be if in 20 years, I'm going to blame you. I'll blame you. I'll be dead. I'll be part of the planet. You know, my carbon, I'll be back in the carbon cycle, right? I'll come back and haunt you. I'd say, this guy should have been doing something. He let all these poor people die.
No,
you have a voice.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why we're trying to get you out. You know, we download in 159 countries. We're growing and it's been incredible. But, you know, unfortunately, it's just really difficult to break this dogma. And that's why I'm hitting it at the millennials and the younger generation, because they're open to it. They're not just saying, okay, well, the doctor's been studying for 14 years. The oncologist, he said, I need to do this. I'm doing that. That's it. Done deal. I'm going to start looking at it. But is there anything else other than Don that can, you know, just target glutamine?
Yeah, well, we know because Johns Hopkins sitting on a drug, it's Don. It's just modified slightly because you can't patent Don. Don is not a money maker. It's a dirty drug, meaning it hits multiple things simultaneously with pathways at the same time. And it's been available. It's not off patent. You can't make it. So what they do is a lot of companies take these drugs and they engineer them to be slightly different. And therefore, I got a patentable drug. Oh my God, I can make $1 billion on this now. It's the same damn drug. You know, it's just that you're going to now, instead of paying $30 for the drug, I'm going to pay, $3,000 or more for a milligram of this stuff. You got to realize that, you know, there's a revenue generation up and down the line everywhere. I'm not against that. I'm not downgrading these people that want to make $1 billion on stuff, but let's make it work and not hurt people. I don't think people would mind paying for a therapy that will keep them alive and make them healthier, rather than paying $300,000 for a drug that doesn't work and will kill them sometimes faster than the tumor. I mean, this is nuts. You can't do this. And you should never be treating patients with anything that has a remote possibility of killing them. What is this stuff, man? Oh, you could die from this drug. You have all kinds of kidney bad. This is nuts. This speaks to someone who has no clue what the hell they're doing. So we don't have to have that. And people need to know about this stuff. But, it's an educational thing, and I don't know how long it's going to take for people to come to know. But I tell you, open up a few clinics and do metabolic therapy, and all of a sudden you're turning out people. You bring them in looking like crap. They're overweight. They got cancer. They got heart. And all of a sudden they come out looking 10 years younger, fit. My cancer's gone. My diabetes is gone. My high blood pressure is gone. My hypertension is gone. I feel like $1 million. So, I mean, what's wrong with that? Oh no, that's no good. You can't have that.
All right, we're coming to the end of the show. Tell us about the future of Professor Thomas Seyfried. Where does he see, his life going, and the research that you're looking at, things that you're excited about in the future? I mean, we've got some significant problems with the traditional medical dogma out there, very, financially oriented. I'm saying there are a lot of good doctors out there, but they're just caught, I think, totally blinded, and also, just in financial sort of, pressure. Just the realization that a lot of these doctors in their loans that they've got and the amount of money that they need to get back after so many years of study. Where is the future looking, bright for Professor Thomas Seyfried?
We're gonna try to get the treatment protocol published, and then I'll let entrepreneurs figure out how to move that into an actionable. That's not my sphere. My sphere is to provide the science that supports the future. The future will be based on the science that we're doing, based on Otto Warburg and a number of others. So we need to know that. But when we realize that cancer is a metabolic disease, we have so many new ways now that will be incorporated that we haven't even thought about in the past. Like, we found a particular drug for pancreatic cancer that was supposed to be a blockbuster, and it didn't work, and it was harming the patient. It was causing too much toxicity without a benefit. And we tried it on our preclinical models of brain cancer, and just the same thing. It was toxic and it didn't work. Then when we used the drug again at low dose with ketogenic metabolic therapy, oh my God, this drug was very, very powerful and didn't have any toxicity. I said, whoa, what happened with that? This is the future. The future is we have all of the drugs and procedures out there. We just have to know how to put them together and use them in the correct way. And then all of a sudden, you're going to open up all kinds of new avenues to treat cancer by all kinds of new ways that we have never considered before, because we were locked into a genetic mindset, genetic think. And now we know it's a metabolic problem. And boy, you're going to find out all kinds of things. Whoa, I didn't know this thing was so powerful. Used under the right, right conditions, these drugs take on new power. And I think that's going to be the revelations of the future. My God, look at all the ways we can manage this. So I think when people are diagnosed with cancer, you're not going to have the amygdala result. You're not going to have the fear-stricken behavior. People are going to know they're going to participate with this, and their oncologists will have many different pathways that they could take to manage this individual person's cancer. It's not one way or the highway. It's going to be, now we have this. This is nice. This is, well, and we'll learn that as we do our preclinical studies here at Boston College, where we vet out all these things in a press pulse kind of a thing. And then we make these discoveries, and I immediately share it with my clinical colleagues. And then they can open, when they're working in the clinics, we can constantly bring in new and better and improved procedures to degrade tumors without toxicity. This is the future. This is what I see as the future. And but we're starting here. This is the beginning, and it will eventually transcend to all of the different countries, because everybody is suffering from the same problem. Doesn't make any difference what the hell your political views are, what your gender is, what your nationality, what your culture is. Biology is biology, and we are all one species, and we all share the same metabolic pathways. And cancer will respond no matter what background you have if you do it the right way. And we have to work in those spheres, and that's the future. That's what I see as the future.
Looks exciting, and just really grateful for your work. I know that you've been in your career for a long time. As the last question, but who are the sort of the young prodigies that you've been working, with, that we're going to look to? I mean, you're obviously in academic fields as well, but who's taken on a lot of your work and who's going to pioneer it in the future?
Yeah, well, this is I don't know people are always calling me and telling me that this is doing, and then I get so many cancer people asking me for help, and I give them a kit of information until the big protocol comes out. And people have to know that all of what we have done over 30 years of research has all been done on shoestring budgets. I mean, we were not getting the hundreds of millions of dollars that all of these big industries get to produce therapies that really don't work that well. And so philanthropy and private foundations have come to our rescue and are keeping our program going. And as the result of that, the entire system and field will change. So the more research money that we have, the more things that we can test, and the better we can improve this. So that's where my future is in the lab, proving over and over again the science, and that's going to open up a new field of academic research, is knowing we're revisiting stuff that people focused on like in the 1920s and 30s during the Warburg era. We can now take our new knowledge of technologies and understanding and now reintegrate the old field into a new field, and better learn how we can do all this. So again, once the theory changes that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disorder, you're going to open up mitochondrial research. You're going to open up all kinds of new avenues that will be generated from, and at the same time, linking this to the improving health of populations throughout the world. So clearly, this will be the future. I have no doubt about it. What the obstacles are in, the obstacles now will be slow. They either get on the bandwagon or get out of the way, because this is coming. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but as more and more people open their mind, go, oh my God, this is correct, then the more and more people are going to want to do it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Professor Thomas Seyfried. I want to declare favor and blessing over you. Courage. You've been absolutely courageous. A calling that you've been so passionate about. Brilliant book that you've written, a lot of the peer-reviewed publications. So I just want to thank you for your time, that you would just be so strong and just be a witness to this incredible new metabolic sort of understanding of cancer.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And we depend on folks like you to get the word out.